Hello, friends. Andy C. Ludick here, president of the Long Island Organizing Network and senior pastor of the Hollywood Full Gospel Baptist Cathedral in Amityville, New York, and the Queens Ministry in New York City. Listen, friends, I am anxious to get out of the way. This is our Women's History Celebration, and I want to turn you over to Dr. Patricia Rickenbacker, who is our host and moderator of this celebration. Come on and celebrate with us.
Thank you, Bishop Luda. Friends, I'm Dr. Patricia Rickenbacker, Senior Pastor of the Living Hope Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Massapequa, New York, and I am delighted to serve as your host and moderator for this Women's History Month celebration. We have selected 5 areas where women have made tremendous contribution, and we have assembled 4 of my colleagues and clerics who will join me in bringing these areas to you. Let me give a quick shout out to Dr. Pam Allen and to Tracy Edwards, who will join us in providing the historical narratives that will be presented. So help me welcome Elder Daedric Sealy, Bishop Designate Helen Seamster, Reverend Soretta McKnight, and Pastor Alexa Burgess Ewart as we celebrate Women's History Month.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rickenbacker. It is really, truly a pleasure for me to be with you this Women's History Month. And what I want to do is just start a little bit with how Women's History Month came into play. Because, as you well know, this is still a time of firsts. And Women's History Month actually started to be Women's History Week in California in 1978. And presidents gave a proclamation every year since 1978 to celebrate Women's History Month. There were not a lot of women of color that were involved at that time. But in 1980 is when President Jimmy Carter actually issued the first proclamation for Women's History Month. That did not change until 1987, when a group of women in California lobbied very hard to change Women's History Week to Women's History Month. So we have a lot to celebrate this month. And what I want to do is start with just showing the women over time and all of the things that they have been involved with. But this morning we have a historic event because we have our President Biden, who nominated Judge Jackson to be our first African-American woman to be on the Supreme Court. So I wanted to make sure that we started to talk about her and spotlight her for all of our young women, especially our young Black women, to actually see the day that we will have a woman to be on the Supreme Court. I'm confident that she is going to be confirmed. We're going to just pray that that happens, and we're going to call it and name it, and I am sure that she is going to be there. But what a wonderful month to celebrate this time with all of these wonderful women that have paved the way for all of us, but then to actually see the day when we would have a Black female Supreme Court judge. So, she was nominated by President Barack Obama in 2013 after the death of Justice Scalia. But then our President Biden actually nominated her in 2021 to be one of his early DC Circuit nominees. Now, what's really a fun fact is that her relative is actually Paul Ryan, who was the former congressman. So it's funny how things come together. but she is married to a doctor, surgeon. She has two little girls, so I'm sure that we're going to see them as the process goes on. But I wanted to ensure that we at least highlighted her this Black History at the end of Black History Month and the beginning of Women's History Month as a historic time for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Rickenbacker. Greetings, beloveds. I believe in God and God's divine order for the universe. I am blessed to come from an ancestry that gave the world civilization. The blood which flows through these veins is royal, of the queens and kings of Africa. I reaffirm my commitment to that ancestry and to the present-day struggle of our people, educationally, economically, socially, politically, and spiritually, as we gather for this Women's History celebration. My assignment is to introduce this segment on female freedom fighters. Over the years, I have been blessed to be involved in numerous social justice issues, from the schoolhouse to the state house, the church house to the White House. As an activist, community organizer, founding board member of the National Action Network with Reverend Al Sharpton, is our fearless leader, and as founder of Sisters in the Struggle, I know firsthand the importance of female freedom fighters. I know firsthand the importance of having a seat at the table. I know firsthand, beloveds, our voice plays an integral role in this lifetime struggle. We are patient and persistent. We are persuasive. And yes, we are powerful. We bring the sustained indignation. So I invite you to join me, beloveds, in these next several minutes as we honor and celebrate these heroines who have stood tall as freedom fighters.
Hello, I'm Dr. Naima.
And I'm Dr. Pam.
And we are going to discuss Black women freedom fighters, or as we like to say, revolutionaries. The first woman that we're going to talk about is Angela Davis. Angela Davis is a prominent activist and scholar. She was born and raised in Alabama, and she is a symbol of the Black liberation movement. In October of 1970, she was arrested in New York City in connection with a shootout that occurred in San Rafael, California, in a courtroom. She was accused of supplying the weapons. Angela Davis, who had championed the cause of Black prisoners and was a friend of George Jackson's Soledad brother, was indicted in the crime, but went into hiding. One of the FBI's most wanted criminals, her trial began in March of 1972, and it drew international attention because of the weakness of the prosecution's case and the obvious political nature of the proceedings. However, in June of 1972, after representing herself, she was acquitted of all charges. Assata Shakur. Assata Shakur is a former member of the Black Liberation Army. She was convicted in the first-degree murder of a New Jersey state trooper during a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. Shakur is wanted by the FBI still currently, and there is a $2 million reward for her apprehension. Even though she was convicted of murder and is one of the FBI's most wanted terrorists, she is largely considered innocent. And in 1987, she published Assata, an autobiography, which was written in Cuba. On November 2nd, 1979, Shakur escaped the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, when 3 members of the Black Liberation Army visiting her drew concealed .45 caliber pistols and a stick of dynamite, but no one was injured during the prison break. Shakur was granted political asylum in Cuba in 1984, which she calls Cuba one of the largest, most resistant, and most courageous Maroon camps that the world has ever seen. She also refers to herself as a 20th century escaped slave. She was a friend of Afeni Shakur and Mutulu Shakur, and is the godmother of their son, Tupac Shakur. Queen Nanny of the Maroons. Queen Nanny, also called Granny Nanny or Nanny of the Maroons, was an 18th century leader of the Jamaican Maroon community. Maroons are slaves who escaped and formed independent settlements. Nanny herself was an escaped slave, and she came from the Ashanti tribe of present-day Ghana, West Africa. She led a community of 800 formerly enslaved Africans for over 50 years. Nanny herself escaped from the sugar plantations and ran into the mountains and jungles of Jamaica. She founded a village in the Blue Mountains on the eastern side of Jamaica, which became known as Nanny Town. These three women are the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. It all began in July of 2013 in Sanford, Florida, when George Zimmerman was acquitted after he'd shot the teenager Trayvon Martin as he walked home. His killing and the subsequent verdict sparked protests and outrage across the United States. When the verdict came out, Alicia Garza, a Black and queer political organizer based in California, took a Facebook post to express her feelings. She wrote a series of posts titled A Love Letter to Black People, which included her writing that, quote, I continue to be surprised at how little Black lives matter. Stop giving up on Black life. At the conclusion of her post, Garza ended with an affirmation. Black people, I love you. I love us. Our lives matter. Patrisse Cullors, a fellow activist who lived in Los Angeles and had met Garza at a conference, modified and summarized the message in the comments of the post. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. And that's how hashtag Black Lives Matter was born. The next day, they reached out to another fellow activist, Opal Tometi, who focused on immigration issues. Tometi began to post hashtag Black Lives Matter on Twitter and Tumblr, and she set up accounts for the movement and began to engage with the public. Protests broke out between the local Black community, and the hashtag Black Lives Matter began to circulate on Twitter even before these three arrived on the scene. But they arrived with 600 activists and protesters that they organized for a bus trip to the city. Over the next few days, the hashtag was used 58,747 times per day. Astronomical increase, and a portent of things to come. Eventually, the hashtag turned into a larger movement. At that point, Black Lives Matter became more than a hashtag or a rallying cry. It was really an umbrella term for a larger movement which began to move in different directions, with different strategies. Soon after, Ferguson, Opal, Alicia, and Patrisse helped create the BLM network infrastructure. It is an adaptive and decentralized with a set of guiding principles. The goal is to support the development of new Black leaders, as well as create a network where Black people feel empowered to determine our destinies in our communities. It now has over 40 chapters across the country, each of which runs its own campaigns and focuses on local issues. Their legacy of civil rights and human rights organizing follows a lofty tradition of Black women, most notably some of the forgotten women of the civil rights movement, like Ella Jo Baker. Tawana Burke. Tawana Burke created a nonprofit organization to help victims of sexual harassment and assault. Miss Burke created the Me Too campaign in 2007. Amplifying the voices of victims has always been Mrs. Burke's goal. Hashtag Me Too became a way for survivors to tell their experience with sexual violence and stand in solidarity with other survivors. The hashtag was widely used on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and other platforms. On Facebook, it was shared in more than 2 million posts and reactions in the first 24 hours, according to the Associated Press.
We always talk about the Ain't I a Woman speech. Who made that speech?
That was Sojourner Truth.
Yes. But today we have Tawana Burke, and instead of Ain't I a Woman, she's saying Me Too. I think that we need to keep in mind all these women that we're talking about today and the women who came before them, who laid the foundation, opened the door and kicked it open.
Ashe. There are so many women that we could discuss that I'm leaving out. I wanted to talk about Winnie Mandela. I wanted to talk about Fanny Lou
Mandela
Hamer.
is a true revolutionary.
And Fanny Lou Hamer has to be
Fanny
a
Lou
great
Hamer,
inspiration.
that's right.
But we don't have time. We are done now. But we have to mention one more. I would feel remiss if we did not mention the original freedom fighter, and that is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is often referred to as the Moses of her people. She was a former slave who had fled to freedom in 1849. She was born into slavery in Maryland in 1822. She was named Araminta by her parents, Ben and Rit Ross. Now, this is interesting to me. She was nearly killed at the age of 13 by a blow to her head. She was called Minty at the time, and she spent 3 to 4 days unconscious, but didn't receive any medical attention. The trauma from that injury stayed with her for the rest of her life. She would have narcolepsy and seizures. When she recovered, though, she was determined to be free. She changed her name to Harriet after marrying a free man named John Tubman in 1844. And 5 years later, she escaped on her own, alone and finding her way to Philadelphia. She vowed to return to bring her family and friends to freedom, and she spent the next 10 years making about 13 trips into Maryland to rescue them. Some of us truly are brave. But the one interesting fact about Harriet Tubman that is not often remembered is in June of 1863, during the Civil War, Harriet Tubman led 150 Black Union soldiers who were part of the U.S. 2nd South Carolina Volunteers. She led them in the Combahee River Raid and liberated more than 700 enslaved people. Harriet Tubman was the only woman known to have led a military operation during the American Civil War. Thanks in great part to the intelligence she provided as a spy, the Union boats, and the over 700 slaves that escaped unharmed, including 100 men who joined the Union Army, the Combahee River Raid was a major military and psychological blow to the Confederate cause.
Harriet Tubman, however, we need to note, was not the only woman who worked on the Underground Railroad. And we have other women. We have women who worked in Texas. We have women who worked all through the South and the North in the Underground Railroad. They didn't have a record like Harriet Tubman of never losing a passenger. In fact, the woman I'm thinking of right now in Texas lost many because it was a major place for the slave catchers to just camp and wait. And the Underground Railroad wasn't something that had 100% success. There were many losses, and Black and white abolitionists lost their lives in the Underground Railroad. And I know you couldn't talk about Winnie Mandela, but we have to note that Winnie Mandela was the revolutionary of our time. While Nelson Mandela was behind bars for 27 years, Winnie was on the front lines fighting the war and keeping his name out. And I know you said you can't talk about a few other people, so I won't. We don't have time. Okay, but it's a conversation that needs to go on, and we need to talk about more than just the people that we know. We have to bring in the new names. If we're going to teach the history, let's teach it all.
Ashe. Well, we'll have to do that next time. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you, Dr. Rickenbacker, for this opportunity to participate in this celebration. My name is Bishop Desmond Helen Seenster from the Koinonia Fellowship in Waterloo, Iowa. I am delighted to introduce this segment of Women in Business as a part of this celebration. I have an affection for this area, in part because of my own involvement in business. I have owned and operated a restaurant for many years, and such am an example of women in business. The historical narrative of women in business includes so many outstanding personalities
who have contributed so much. So I invite you to join us as we take a plunge and look at several women who have done so much in the area of women in business. Thank you.
We would not be here with Women's History Month if it wasn't for Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker really paved the way for all of our women of color. She was an entrepreneur. She was a philanthropist. She was an activist. She rose from poverty to become one of the wealthiest African American women in her time. So, you know, women always do things in order to actually save their family and support their family and raise their children and partner with their spouses. And what she did is in 1889, she actually moved with her four brothers who were barbers to St. Louis, Missouri. She then became a laundryist and she inspired Black women. She joined the African American Episcopal Church and she learned through education and success, but they still struggled. And through that struggle becomes stress. Stress, of course, with women is prominent. And what she did is because of that stress, she actually faced hair loss. So what she did is she bottled all of that together and she came up and developed a hair product and straightener for African American women. Madam Walker's wonderful hair grower. So she took something that was devastating to her personally and turned it into a manufacturing hair goods product for all Black women. So I wanted to stay in that line of cosmetics and just touch upon two other wonderful female in the cosmetic industry. We have Iman. Iman was born in Somalia. She was a wonderful model. She was a top model. She is still known for charity work. She is married to a rocker, David Bowie. And she really went and started this out of, again, a missing link for African American women. There were no shades in darker complexions at that time. So she would go into the store and there would be nothing there for her. So after 20 years of being a fabulous model, she started in 1984 a line, a cosmetics line that you'll see that is worth $25 million today. And I want to end in cosmetics with this young woman, Lyanna Archer, who I believe actually lives in Central Islip on Long Island. And she was always complimented about her hair. So what did she do at 11 years old? She then started her own natural organic hair line, butters and shampoos. And she helped earn over $100,000 in revenue, which has grown to now millions of dollars. So we go from Madam C.J. Walker to Iman, and then we end with Lyanna Archer, who's paving the way for other young women. We then move to the entertainment industry. And I just wanted to just spotlight those women who really have took this by our reins. We have Susan Taylor, Oprah Winfrey, Deborah Lee from BET, and now we have Chandra Rhymes. Chandra Rhymes is one of the most sought after producers in our time. She is the first African American woman to create and executive produce 10 primetime television series, from Grey's Anatomy to Scandal, Private Practice. She's just amazing. And she's one of the most popular and powerful people in Hollywood, not just African-American people, not just African-American women. She is one of the most sought after writers and producers in entertainment. Just a wonderful thing for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Rickenbacker. I am Elder Daedric Sealy, and I serve on the ministerial staff of the Hollywood Full Gospel Baptist Cathedral in Amityville, New York, under the leadership of Bishop Andy C. Luter. I am also the Dean of the New Life School of Theology Monroe campus, also on Long Island. Over the years, I have been an avid fan of music and consumer of television and movies. Therefore, you can imagine how delighted I am to introduce to you our segment of Women in Entertainment. The list of women in entertainment is extensive, and we are hopeful that we can celebrate but a few of the immense talents that have entertained us over the years. So sit back and join me in this segment of our celebration that salutes women in entertainment.
Hi, this is Dr. Pam
And Dr. Naima.
We're going to talk about great Black women entertainers in the past who paid the dues, opened the doors, and laid the foundation, and were living examples for modern great artists. Aretha became a queen. Diana became the lead singer in the most successful girl group in history. So, Jennifer Hudson could win 2 Grammy Awards, a Daytime Emmy Award, a Golden Globe Award, a Screen Actors Guild Award, Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential Award, and this week, the 2022 NAACP Entertainer of the Year Award. All right. Sarah Vaughan opened the way for the voice of Samara Joy. Samara Joy won the Sarah Vaughan International Jazz Vocal Competition while she was still a student. She grew up in New York. Her father toured with Andre Crouch, and in high school, she says her training was at the church choir, where she was a worship leader. She said singing 3 services a week for nearly 2 years. Samara Joy has just released an album, a jazz album. She is really carrying the torch. And she's touring right now in the country to sold out audiences all over. I know I couldn't get tickets. Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne did. So Beyonce could. Beyonce could become a singer, a songwriter, a producer, a dancer, an actress, a businesswoman, and a director. All right, Beyonce. Josephine Baker sang and spied. Nina Simone sang and wrote and became an activist. So, India Ari could sing and speak out and fight and represent her true self and make it all right for girls today. Moms Mabley was toothless and a little bit raunchy. So Tiffany Haddish can do stand-up, sketch comedy, star in movies, star in television, write books, and be a little bit raunchy. Marian Anderson sang outside, so Patti LaBelle could kick off her shoes and sing outside the normal range. Oh, all right, I've been told to stop. We have so many more that we could look at and talk about. We always talk about the people in the past. We want to talk about these young people and not so young who are carrying the torch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
God bless you, Dr. Rickenbacker, and thank you for the opportunity to lend my voice with those that have been chorused to assemble to laud and proclaim this Women's History Month celebration program. From the time of my youth, I have enjoyed reading, whether it's been poetry, novels, or articles of interest. So this is why I am so excited about introducing to you the topic of literature for the celebration of Women's History Month. Over the years, women have made outstanding strides in the area of providing us with the memorable examples of the written word. Having said that, I am certain that you are going to relish these next several moments as we honor just a few of the women who are heroines of literature. God bless and enjoy.
We go to journalism with our great Sojourner Truth, activist, powerful writer. If we laugh and sing a little as we fight the good fight of freedom, it makes it all go easier. I will not allow my life's light to be determined by the darkness around me. She was one of those people who started it all. And then we go to Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Yamiche Alcindor, and Amanda Gorman. So these women have paved the way, for I know that we were all watching when Yamiche Alcindor, it was her turn to ask those tough questions in the White House briefing room. She is a Haitian American journalist. She was on PBS NewsHour. She was a podcast. She's a political journalist on NBC and MSNBC. She is just now she was on Meet the Press, and now she is one of the top journalists, graduated from Georgetown. She still is a Alpha Kappa Alpha, powerful female Black woman in journalists. And then we end with Amanda Gorman. I still remember when Amanda Gorman appeared at that inauguration, that powerful young woman from Harvard University, where she actually studied sociology. She has now become one of the most sought after poets in our country. She has written for the New York Times. She has 3 books that are coming. Born and raised in Los Angeles. Another woman, another young woman that is paving the way for all of our young Black females that can see themselves. It's hard to imagine being something when you don't see yourself. But now our young women can see themselves and not just read about historical figures. They can see people that look like them.
Well, friends, we have looked at 5 vital areas that women have made significant contribution in, but our program would not be complete without the inclusion of education. While I currently pastor a local church for many years, I served as an educator in the public school system. Therefore, you can imagine my own personal passion for education. And even though I have left the classroom, I continue to work in the area of education by providing a theological training opportunity as a satellite campus of New York Theological Seminary of New York City, and have served as the State Dean of Education for my Baptist denomination. So join me now in these next few minutes as we look at women in education. For Women's History Month, we chose to take a look at the contributions of Black women to the educational cause. You might not have heard of all the people we're going to highlight in just a few minutes, but the work these African Americans are doing and have done to change and improve the quality of education, whether it is through legislation, in the classroom, or from the college dean's office, is invaluable. The contributions and achievements of African Americans in the field of education are diverse and they're wide-reaching. However, few of those responsible really get the credit that they really deserve. So here we want to just acknowledge a few of the pioneers and the game changers who work to provide learning opportunities, improve curricula, and break down barriers for students of color across the country. At the forefront are our Black teachers who have influenced countless students over the years, and America wouldn't be what it is without them. So as we celebrate Women's History Month, let's highlight some of the greatest Black educators to enter America's classrooms. I want to begin with one of the early Black women education pioneers by the name of Susie Baker, who was born into slavery near Savannah, Georgia in 1848. When Susie was 7 years old, her enslavers allowed her and two of her siblings to move to Savannah, Georgia, to live with their free grandmother. Now, it was illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write, but Susie's grandmother knew that education was important. And despite Georgia's harsh laws against the formal education of African Americans, she sent Susie to two secret schools for Black children that were actually taught by Black women. So Susie used what she learned to help her grandmother and other free Black people in her neighborhood to resist the oppressive laws that they lived under. For example, she wrote passes for her Black family and friends so they could travel at night without being arrested by the city watchman. Susie moved back to the family plantation after a while, but soon after her return, Susie's uncle helped her escape to the Union Army line. There she became one of the thousands of the escaped enslaved people who were considered contraband by the Union Army and was sent to a camp at St. Simon's Island. It didn't take long after her arrival that Union soldiers noticed that she actually was educated. So what they did was they offered to buy her books and materials if she would start a school for the children that lived in the camp. Well, Susie eagerly agreed, and at the age of 14, she founded the first school for free Black children. Imagine, at 14 years old, that was run by a Black woman. By day, she taught the children, and at night, she taught their parents. And we celebrate Susie Baker and her contribution to the literacy of our people. Then we go on with another early Black educator, pioneer, by the name of Fanny Jackson Coppin. Fanny was also born a slave. Coppin became a pioneering educator towards the end of the Civil War. She was a graduate of Oberlin College, and she opened a night school for freed slaves and was the first Black woman to be named principal of a school when she took the reins of the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia in 1869. Another Black woman educator, one of the early pioneers, was also Charlotte Fortin Grimke. She was the first Black teacher to work at the Penn School in South Carolina, which was a school that was established to help educate newly freed Black slaves after the Civil War. Many years later, as she continued her work, she transferred her work to the U.S. Treasury Department, where she helped to recruit Black educators. And we salute Charlotte Grimke today. We move now a little bit further into the 20th century to Black women education pioneers. And one that is well known to many of us is Nanny Helen Burroughs. Now, Nanny Helen Burroughs was a Black educator per excellence. She was an orator, she was a religious leader, she was a civil rights activist, she was a feminist and a businesswoman in the United States. She did it all. Her speech, How the Sisters Are Hindered from Helping, at the 1900 National Baptist Convention in Virginia, instantly won her fame and recognition. Then another 20th century Black woman educator pioneer was Mary Mcloy Bethune, who became one of the most important civil rights leaders of the 20th century. She was a lifelong educator, working as a teacher before founding Bethune-Cookman College, which actually set the educational standards for today's Black colleges. She went on to become the highest ranking African American woman in government when President Franklin Roosevelt named her as Director of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration. She leaves an indelible mark on society, on education, but especially on her people, whom she raised to standards that we never knew we would be able to reach had it not been for the work of Mary Mcloy Bethune. We celebrate her on today. Along with that, it's so very easy to miss our contemporaries that we have in our midst right now that are making a difference in the field of education in our local community. And I just want to highlight 3 of those out here on Long Island. Long Island has been a bastion of white, male, dominant leadership in our schools, in our government. But out of that has arisen out of the ashes 3 outstanding women of color who are making the difference in our predominantly Black districts here on the island. The first that I want to salute and lift up is Dr. Gina Talbert, who is the superintendent of Wyandanch Union Free School District in Wyandanch, New York, who's bringing tremendous change, innovation, and just lifting Wyandanch out of the ashes, because we are Wyandanch Rising. We want to salute the work that she has done. Second of our notable Black history educators here on Long Island is Regina Armstrong, who is the superintendent of the Hempstead Union Free School District in Hempstead, New York. She came into this office about a year ago after being the acting superintendent, and she has hit the ground running, making a difference, bringing the community and the school board and the students together to elevate the district to where it should and will be. And finally, we want to highlight Dr. Monique Darasour, superintendent of Uniondale Union Free School District in Uniondale, New York. And we are celebrating the work that she has done, taking on tremendous adversity and challenges, but again, has met the task and excelled beyond what anyone could ever have imagined, as she is also making great strides to educate our children and to unite that community. My brothers and sisters, that brings us to a close of this segment of the presentation, but there are so many more that could have been named and should have been named, but with the exception of time and constraints, we could not.
So I want to end where I started, with actually Judge Brown Jackson, our President Biden, keeping his commitments to actually nominate the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. It is going to be a wonderful, wonderful Women's History Month. And I cannot wait to glue myself to the seat to see her answer all of those questions with style, with grace, with power. I'm confident that she will be confirmed, and she will be our first Black woman on the Supreme Court.
Well, friends, that takes up all of our time, and I want to thank you for yours. For the last several minutes, you have been watching our 2022 Women's History Celebration. I want to thank my clergy colleagues for their participation, and Sister Tracy Edwards and Dr. Pam Allen for their historical narratives. And I especially want to thank you for joining us today. Please share this program with your family and friends. God bless.